Good afternoon. Welcome to this important meeting. I'm glad to see that you have come out in your numbers to discuss with us the subject of transforming education through regional collaboration, a team Europe perspective. We will be discussing partnerships, international partnerships, harnessed to support education. This is conducted under the presidency, the French presidency of the EU. We've only got one day left to go to hold that position, and we are looking forward to discussing how to support our educational systems in difficult times. Now, as I've indicated, there is translation into English. You should be on channel 1 to hear the English, which will be an opportunity to hear our 3 introductory speakers. We have Mr. Papnier, Minister of Education and Youth for France, Mr. Didier Lenoir, Ambassador, Permanent Representative of the EU to UNESCO and OECD, and Ms. Stéphanie Janier, Assistant Director General for Education at UNESCO. And I am Louise Touré, and I am here to moderate the discussion. Mr. Ndiaye, Minister of Education and Youth for France, will take the floor first. Thank you very kindly, Louise Touré. This is an opportunity to pay tribute to your excellent radio program on France Culture Radio. Madame and Masters Ministers, Madam Commissioner, Madam Assistant Director General, ladies and gentlemen, we have gathered together at this UNESCO pre-summit to discuss the urgent matter of the needed investments into education. The COVID epidemic has dealt heavy blows to children and adolescents in our countries, isolating them and keeping them out of schools during lockdowns, and in some cases have unraveled the fundamental bond that tied our children and teenagers to learning and knowledge. Mandatory schooling, which is a universal right and became a universal right after the Second World War, which was already very difficult to ensure in certain regions of the world, has in some cases been swept aside completely and has been completely disrupted in even the most developed countries. We know that this is a right and that it is very vulnerable. Let us never forget that educational systems have become a priority target in this time of war. Most recent conflicts, very devastating conflicts, have shown us the risk. In Afghanistan, after the Taliban seized power last August, girls aged over 12 have had to give up on their schooling, and in the Ukraine, there will be children in Mariupol who will have to give up their summer holidays to take accelerated Russian language lessons in order to be able to get their schooling in Russian in September. So our children are being deprived of knowledge, or they are being taught forcibly, and within the space of 1 year, there have been 2 attacks on the educational system worldwide. This is the result of the use of force and is the result of war. Let us not forget that the lack of education and the manner in which propagandists have a tendency to try to misuse education to serve their own purposes can also be the breeding ground for future war. Now, we are extraordinarily concerned about these situations, and the alliance of our states that dates back to 1948 in order to protect human rights, according to the Declaration of Human Rights, has had to mobilize and has mobilized even further since Rio in 1992. We are now aware that human rights are vital and are urgently in need of protection. Water, energy, the climate, and biodiversity are all under threat. A number of our institutions, including education, are part of the common international good. If we don't protect this common good of education, if we don't immediately put every economic effort into protecting it, we will suffer without limit or we risk suffering without limit. France has been very active in battling this world emergency and has written into its international agendas the protection of this human right. The French presidency of the European Union has an excellent track record in this regard. We have worked very hard to champion education, to restore its power, and to restore its situation as an international common good. We welcome the initiatives of the UN and UNESCO with great interest, and we are convinced that it is essential to show that the European Union is already hard at work striving to achieve the goals of transforming education. The convergence that has become established in the run-up to the UNTES has been the opportunity for Europe to hammer out its priorities as written out in the Strategic Framework for Education 2021-2030. The goals we will strive to achieve are to bolster quality, equity, and inclusion and success for all, to extend skills and motivation among the teachers, to make lifelong learning a reality for all, to support the environmental and digital transitions in education. And the cross-cutting priority of the European Union is to ensure that the necessary investments are made into education, which is the absolute requirement if we are to achieve the 4 priorities that I've just mentioned. This is a priority which the French presidency of the European Union has worked hard to further, and we have engaged in a very fruitful dialogue with the OECD and UNESCO through the Paris Declaration, which was adopted on November 10th last. These common concerns between the European Union and the UN show that it will be absolutely essential to act at international scale to achieve Sustainable Development Goal number 4 and to ensure that all children everywhere in the world enjoy quality education, and girls and marginalized children among them being no exception. We are all faced with the same challenges, and we must urgently enter into dialogue and cooperate to reach our common goals. At national level, France has been working hard on this, and at European Union level, we have worked hard to hammer out what is henceforth going to be called the European space of school, which is the institutionalization of dialogue and discussions where we share best practices among member states. This conversation must make it possible to ensure that the diversity of our educational system benefit the entire population of Europe, ensuring prosperity, peace, and that all the means necessary are mobilized to ensure social cohesiveness based on the fundamental values of freedom and democracy. In France, we have been working hard to prepare the TES summit of next September. I'm convinced personally that the discussions that will be held there will be informed by the regional experience of Team Europe, but also by the partnerships that this team has established through its public aid to development. Ladies and gentlemen, ministers, Madam Commissioner, the pooling of our institutional capacities is urgent, and we are all required here and now to act if we want to act to prevent what H.G. Wells predicted.
Between education and catastrophe, l'histoire de l'humanité devient de plus en plus course entre l'éducation et la catastrophe. Il nous revient de garder la catastrophe dans les territoires relatifs de la fiction. L'éducation est le seul moyen de vivre dans une réalité commune en éloignant les spectres de la guerre et de la misère qui désunissent et détruisent. Je vous remercie.
Et c'est nous qui vous remercions.
Thank you very kindly, Mr. Minister. So we're now going to hear the European Commissioner, Mr. Didier Lenoir, is going to take the floor. He is the ambassador and the permanent representative of the European Union to UNESCO and the OECD, who has a message for us from the Commissioner of Europe. Thank you very kindly indeed. Yes, Biden was unable to attend this meeting. She is extremely attached to UNESCO, and she sets great store by the work of UNESCO, and it is really because she was unable to make time in her busy schedule to be here that she did not attend. We are delighted to have this opportunity to share a report on what we have been doing as part of Team Europe, pulling all together in the service of education.
An opportunity together to step up our engagement, our Team Europe collaboration to transform education system. I'd like to make three points. The first one is that Team Europe has a good expertise, is a rich source of expertise and knowledge on education, and is ready to put this expertise and knowledge at the disposal of everybody. We exchange best practice and expertise. We want to work at the regional level in order to take forward our agenda. We, within the Team Europe, we do share a vision of education as a power to transform societies, making them more equitable, more inclusive, more green, and more digital. And I should say we have a track record of tangible success. The international standing and the diversity of our 27 education system in Europe is one of the assets that we can now, I think, better leverage working together as a Team Europe. My second point is that we are ready to invest in education. Mrs. Urpilainen has decided to increase the financing to education in our partner countries from 7 to 13% of the budget for international partnership. It means a 2 billion euro increase. Together, one should remember that the EU and its member states do account for 55% of the official development assistance education grants. This should be maintained and not reduced. Despite the war on our continent, we are not turning back our backs to our partner. In the framework of our Global Gateway strategy, Team Europe promises to deliver impactful investment for education all over the globe. And we have started rolling out our Team Europe Education flagship, an initiative in Africa, in Latin America, and in Indo-Pacific region. We have already some very good examples, like, for instance, the EU's initiative in Mozambique. This initiative empowers girls by supporting those who wish to pursue science, technology, engineering, and math skills and promote codes. It also boosts partnerships between the Mozambican and European universities and offers scholarship to young Mozambicans for study program in Europe. We are also developing a regional Team Europe initiative in Africa, and will explore a similar one in Latin America and the Caribbean to support teachers training, a key aspect of the transform education process. The third point is that our ambition is to be a real player and not only a payer. As Team Europe, we must deliver on financing, obviously, but also on political priorities and on results in education. So we have 3 months to the summit, and we should use these 3 months as an opportunity to create momentum together with our partners. It's urgent, it cannot wait, and Team Europe will be a champion and effective driving force in the education sector. It will be a champion at country level, at regional level, and on the global stage. But we think we can be more coherent, more impactful, more transformational. To put it simply, we should and can make a difference to the education of millions of children and young around the world. With this in mind, I very much look forward to our discussion and contribution today. Thank you very much.
Merci.
Thank you very kindly, sir. And to round up this introductory session, we're going to hear Ms. Stefania Giannini, is the Assistant Director General for Education at UNESCO.
Beaucoup, cher ministre.
Thank you very kindly, dear Minister Papandai, dear Ambassador Lenoir. Excellencies, thank you very much for joining us here this afternoon. I would like to thank the Minister who found the time to join us for this marathon session devoted to education. I'd also like to thank the French presidency of the European Commission for this invitation. Mr. Minister, sir, you stated it very clearly indeed in your introductory statement. The French presidency of the European Union has worked very hard to address this urgent topic of education. We need to keep education on course and avoid disaster, particularly through collective efforts and through a commitment that starts here in Paris, travels to New York and beyond for the TES summit of next September devoted to the financial and political investments that are required into education. These investments must not only increase, they must be fairer and they must be more effective. We need to achieve inclusiveness. We need to harness the resources that will allow us to support education and fix what has become broken. We have with us representatives of many organizations that have been working to support education. This is indeed in the spirit of the Paris Declaration.
So last November, at the event organised by UNESCO and co-presided over by France, I believe that many people in this room remember the very strong speech made by Emmanuel Macron in November. And he really wanted to highlight the idea of improving investment in education, thanks to public financing and also thanks to public-private partnerships. Indeed, the goal is to really make the most of the contributions of stakeholders that could be even more involved in these common commitments. So this is an appeal that is more and more urgent every day. I'm sure you know many of these figures when it comes to education, but I'm going to perhaps quote the global reports of the World Bank when it comes to bilateral contributions to education, investments in education. There was a drop between 2019 and 2020, and that was before COVID and before Ukraine, so before the crises that we are going through today. All of this means that we really must bring to the fore the ideas of recovery and transformation. All of this is part of the same effort, common effort that we will need to make. It will mean that we will need to find a different way to work together. In his remarks in the forum yesterday, Mrs. Pilainen spoke about the idea that we need to invest more and better when it comes to the way that Europe invests in these commitments. And I believe that Team Europe is an example of an approach that really does give a lot of importance to three dimensions in particular that are extremely important at international level: harmonization, collaboration, and also understanding. It's a bottom-up approach, in fact, that we speak about first and foremost. That is to say, getting all of the community on board so that they all understand the goal, the issues, and that they are all, let's say, singing from the same hymn sheet. That is the real spirit of the summit and of this process, with particular focus put on national consultations. The national consultations are still going on. Over 100 countries have set up consultation processes, and they are ready to report on these processes at a national and regional level. We need to make sure that there are new mechanisms like the global mechanism, but there's also the regional mechanisms. For example, Portugal was mentioned, and the idea of making sure that we can pool data and other kinds of resources. So when it comes to the global monitoring report and the statistics of UNESCO, with the help of regional organizations, all of this helps countries to focus on their indicators so that they can strengthen planning and have more and more accountability, notably towards donors. So it is easier for them to be accountable when it comes to all of the progress that has been made and all of the obstacles that need to be overcome. This is the reason why we have perhaps not reached the goals that we needed to reach by now. So we listened to young people yesterday who were breathing new life into these new platforms. Some people may have thought that perhaps that we were running out of steam, but in fact we are energized by these processes. Now, one of the things that we want to do is to have widespread cooperation on a large scale. We want to keep working with the European Union on the issue of teachers in the G5 and Sahel region. We want to bring all of our expertise and all of our skills to a flagship program in the region for teachers in sub-Saharan Africa too. We believe this can be a real driving force for change, making sure that teachers are well prepared, are motivated, and that they receive good pay. We share the vision that when international organizations and political leaders and civil society all together work around common priorities, we will be able to pave the way for the transformation that we need so that we can make a real difference at the global region, at the global level, rather, but also on the ground for children who currently do not have access to education. In this, we remain committed. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much to all three of you. And now I would like to invite the distinguished members of the panel to come up to the stage so that we can continue with this lively discussion. To follow on from what Mrs. Giannini was speaking about, we are already energized. Thank you very much to the permanent representative to UNESCO and the OECD. Thank you very much to the ADG, and thank you to the French Minister for Education and Youth. There are going to be quite a few of us up on the stage for the next session, for the panel session, in fact.
Alors,
So, in the discussions that will follow, I will give the time to each of the different panelists to take their seats, but there are going to be two main rounds, let's say. We're going to be speaking about what is the role of the European Union and other regions of the world when it comes to having a vision of partnerships. Here we're speaking about partnerships for education. And the second round will focus on the way that these partnerships can, very concretely, contribute to overcoming the different challenges when it comes to transforming education. That's something that we've just spoken about. Now, this panel session will be followed by certain speeches from those who are also listening to these different interventions. Now, you know, it's a very, very dense program that we have today, so I would like to present to you, but of course here up on the screen you can see the names of the participants. We're going to be speaking about the role of the European Union, I remind you, and other regions of the world, and we have decided, those who organised today's event, of course not me on my own, but we've decided to give the floor first and foremost to two representatives of the youth. And I would like to give the floor first to Martina Darmanin. You are from Malta. You are head of a European Students' Union. Now, I myself actually went to an Erasmus program, but how do these programs contribute to the quality of education and training in Europe?
Thank you very much. It's also a lot of pressure to go first from all of the speakers, but I will try my best. I can refer to many of the popular European programs, such as the Erasmus Mobility Degree programs and the Erasmus traineeships that have enabled students to gain new competencies and skills and also be able to bridge their education with the labour market. So in this form of applying their education in real-life practice is one way to contribute to quality education. But I would also like to go beyond this and discuss EU initiatives that contribute to quality education in a way that understands that quality education cannot be achieved if this education is exclusive, or if this education does not allow for sustainable development and innovation, and if this education does not allow for democratic rights to be exercised by the members of those community. And I can refer to the EU policy initiatives on micro-credentials and internationalization at home that enables flexibility, for example, for people who are already in the workforce to access education both domestically and globally, but also policy initiatives to include quality climate education and education for sustainable development in curricula that acknowledges interdisciplinarity as a key factor to find solutions to our current crises. There are policy initiatives contributing to quality education through equity, inclusion and diversity, where in the Bologna process we have the European Commission and the EU member states moving towards action-oriented, evidence-based policymaking. And I refer to indicators that measure, for example, the accessibility of publicly funded support measures for students, accessibility to counseling and guidance, continuous professional development for teachers, and data collection to be able to identify where attention is needed the most. Last but not least, in my last minute, I will refer to the Council recommendation on building bridges for effective European higher education cooperation, where we see the commitment to enable students and staff, regardless of their backgrounds, to exercise their democratic right to participate in the governance of education. And the EU supports already financially youth and student representative organizations to run their operations. And this is crucial. Why? Because within these organizations, you have the training grounds for young people and students to practice global active citizenship skills in practice. This is indispensable regardless of whether you study political science or applied sciences. At the end of the day, we are part of a political society that is becoming more and more polarized, and education needs to be where we can learn how to navigate through that, how to use our voice and our rights to be impactful and contribute meaningfully to our communities. So I hope to have given the full spectrum of all the initiatives on the EU level. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Alors, je dois vous...
Okay, so just a little technical message. At 3 o'clock, we won't have any more interpreting. We may have a little bit more time after 3 o'clock, but not that much. So in the interest of time, if everybody could just go quite quickly. Mr. Nyang Deng, you have been working in Kenya in a refugee camp. And you have actually been involved in many educational programs. So what is the added value of partnerships between countries and regions of the world when it comes to improving education?
Thank you so much. I will try to be very brief. My name is Nial Deng. I'm a South Sudanese refugee writer and community activist. I spent 11 years in Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya. I now live in Canada, where I attend college. And I just finished my first year of university. Yes, while I was in Kakuma, I was involved in a number of education programs. And as we all know, education is a powerful tool that young people in emergency and crisis setting can use to be able to secure a more hopeful and brighter future for themselves and their communities. And I think when you look at partnership, I think partnership, matters a lot, and I think should be at the core of everything we do. For a few things, I think, one thing that is very, very crucial in our world we live today and in the context of this world, which is why partnership is important, is that, of the common values we share, or the common interests. I think when you look at partnership, it's all about, peace and security. I think those are things that we care about, in Europe, in Africa as well, education, liberty. So I think, because of those reasons, partnership is very important and something that that should be, put at the priority of everything. And then I think the other reason as well why partnership is important is because of interconnectedness of issues. When you look at issues like the climate crisis, issues such as the COVID-19 pandemic, it brings to light how much how well is interconnected, and issues that affect one continent can transcend borders and affect issues in different places. So that brings to light why it is important that different countries in Europe and Africa come together and try to find common ground and try to find ways to work together. And then also, experiences as well. As much as contexts are different, I think there's a huge opportunity when countries come together to be able to share best practices, to be able to share experiences, to be able to share ideas, to be able to find solutions and actions and ways to move things forward. And I think that is a huge opportunity as well. And, as we, move forward partnership, I think two things that we should put at the core of this process. One is meaningful youth engagement. I think for us to be able to envision the future, we cannot envision the future without having young people at the decision-making table. So it's very important that young people are at the process of this whole process. And something that is also very important is listening to communities as well, making sure we listen to the communities that are affected by this crisis, put them at the table as well, listen to their voices, and also explore opportunities for young people to come together. My colleague Martina mentioned about programs like Erasmus that bring together young people from different regions to come together and collaborate and be able to share ideas and explore ways to improve their work in their communities. So I think it's very important to have more of those programs so that young people from the African continent, young people from Europe can come together and to have a space where they can be able to improve their work, where they can be able to advance their work, and ways they can move things forward in their communities. And lastly, I think, it is very, very important that we prioritize education at all levels. As we all know, the amount of funding that is given to education is very, very little and very, very less. And I think, we cannot be able to have bold ideas and move education forward if we do not invest and put a lot of money in education. So we really need to make sure education is prioritized at all levels, not just in having bold ideas, but in making sure we invest the necessary finance in education so that, all the incredible ideas that we are able to, that will come out of this discussion can be implemented. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. And we will come back to the issue of financing and investment for education. But now I'd like to give the floor to Lee Anderson. I'll continue in French. You are Minister of Education for Finland. The education system in Finland is one of the best in the world. So what lessons have you learned from regional partnerships, and what about the European space for education?
Thank you very much, Excellencies and dear participants. First, I wish to thank the organizers, the EU Commission and the French Presidency for convening this meeting. As we know, the 27 EU member states cooperate practically in all areas of education and training, also promoting the European education area. So with the support of the European Commission, the member states are all the time involved in peer learning, in monitoring and regular policy debates. And in this way, the EU can support the work that is done in the member countries to strengthen our education system, to improve quality and equity, all of these important objectives that our youth representative, Martina, also talked about in her own speech. I strongly believe that international cooperation in education and training is vital for our collective efforts to address the global challenges that we are all facing. Strengthening the level of knowledge, skills and competence of our citizens, increasing educational equality and supporting continuous learning should be made a key objective in the EU cooperation, but also in the dialogue and collaboration with our external partners. And in this respect, I'm extremely happy that the amount of EU's external financing directed to education has increased, and that education is widely included in EU's Team Europe initiatives. And I do believe that EU can foster strategic partnership and mutual learning with other regions. And I think what we have learned in Finland and what we like to talk about is the role of teachers as the cornerstone when we talk about quality in education. And peer learning, collaboration is also important when we develop our teachers' education. In the EU cooperation, new flagship Erasmus Plus teacher academies seeks to create European partnerships of teachers, education providers, to support the work that is done for the European education area. And in terms of EU's external cooperation, Finland is actively engaged in the design of the EU's Global Gateway regional program on teacher education in the sub-Saharan Africa. And we look forward to strengthen research-based approach in policy development and build on collaboration between European and African teacher education providers and expertise, since we know that teachers' education, investing in teachers is kind of the foundation and the basis for everything else that we want to do in terms of educational policy. Thank you.
Thank you very kindly. Major priority, training our teachers. That is a critical requirement, and we will, if time permits, revert to that topic later. Let us now hear from Nesmi Manigat, Minister for Education in Haiti. Haiti is a partner of the European Union. How do the partnerships with the European Union require improving, and what can Europe do to help support education in Haiti? Thank you very kindly. Haiti is a country where the demographic transition is significant. 70% of the population is under 30 years of age, and half the population is under 18. It is of vital importance today, given the current transformations underway in education. It is vital that our partnerships transform with those transformations. The European Union is a long-standing partner of Haiti's and has always supported different projects to improve access, to improve the quality of education. And today, as we seek to improve our educational system in a country that is in the throes of great economic difficulties, that is in the midst of a political transition, a complete repositioning is required. I believe it is critical that Team Europe, beyond the traditional cooperation that we have always engaged in, building infrastructure and school equipment, tackling fundamental learning. It is critical today that we pay close attention to vocational training for youth and providing training in the jobs of tomorrow. When it comes to preschooling, when it comes to fundamental learning, I'm convinced that given the current challenges that we face, and I've been listening closely to our young people since yesterday, the representatives of youth since yesterday, it is, to my way of thinking, critical that we bear in mind two things. The geographical environment of the Caribbean, often very adversely affected by global warming, at constant risk of natural disasters. This requires that cooperation in our curricula be bolstered. We need to cooperate more closely in the Caribbean and in Haiti with Europe when it comes to vocational and technical training for youth. This is an absolutely critical requirement. So there are things that have not changed in the set of requirements, but there are also new requirements, including the fact of giving opportunities to young people so that they can engage in participation as citizens, getting involved in the reform of curriculum, becoming environmental citizens, and that they must find opportunities as well.
Alors,
we are going to change the order of our speakers. We are going to return to Europe and Italy and hear from Mr. Patrizio Bianchi, Minister of Education for Italy, who will discuss inclusion, which is one of the priorities of the European Space for Education. You are going to report on the progress made in this area by Europe, and then if you could please take up immediately the second question that I was going to ask you, which is what the outcome of the initial round of work has been, work devoted to the co-leadership on the inclusive, healthy, and equitable school in Italy, which is critical for our future.
Thank you, Luis. I'm sorry if I asked to speak more now, but I have to go to another conference. You know, it's such a day. Well, we are involved in many things. Anyway, let me say a couple of things before to answer to the question that you posed, Luis. Let me say a couple of things about this conference. Let me say that this morning I was very impressed by the success of this conference. Why so many people, so many ministers in this conference? The answer is because we need to find again the way of dialogue after the COVID, after the tension that we have at international level, after a possible crisis. It's necessary to restore the possibility to work together. And education. Education is the proper place. It's the place where we can find again the possibility of international cooperation, more integration. And inclusion is the proper issue. Why inclusion is so relevant? I was impressed this morning also by the fact of the general consensus. The general consensus was on the idea that education is a basic human right. And the fact that all the countries said that we have to provide the condition to guarantee to everybody the possibility to have a proper education. This is important. This is an extraordinary basis to start a new age of international cooperation, a political cooperation, because political cooperation is based on the fact that we recognize the basic values. And education is considered by all the countries as a basic value. Value for human dignity, but also for development, also for growth. Equality, equity, equality and growth. This is extremely important. Education, equity and growth. The new development is based on human resources. And human resources is the result of the investment that we can share together in education. This is a basic difference. Why inclusion is so important? Because inclusion means integration. There is no inclusion if we are not able to think together to a new scheme of integration. In this sense, we have two words that are crucial, and also the debate that we have with our friends from Namibia in our group is relevant. The first is continuity. The capacity to have a human experience, to start a period of school in one country and to move for different reasons in another one, but to have the continuity, to have the possibility to recognize what I have done in my country and what I have to do in another country. And the second is personalization, because we have different contexts, but we have the same right to have a proper education. And this is relevant, and also the word inclusion is changed over time. Many years ago, Italy was a country of emigration, and the entire system was based on emigration. Now it's a country of immigration, and we have to take into account that we have to provide inclusion, that means integration, of people coming from different experiences. But this is the real wealth of our time. We have to recognize that this is not a problem. This is the possibility to work on diversity, because diversity allows complementarity, and complementarity is the basis of social efficiency. But it's clear that we need examples. And in this sense, I think that the experience of Europe is extremely useful, Luis. The experience of Erasmus that you mentioned, Lee. What we can learn from Erasmus? You know, in Europe, or at least in my country, but I think also in your country, the idea is we have to make a reform. This means a huge law. a fantastic law with all the things, with all the capacity to create rules for everything. I know that is my country, not your country. I know that you are much more free. But what happened? Happened that Erasmus talked to us that when we put the young people to move from a country to the others, the institution, they have to adjust themselves in order to start to speak together. I feel that Erasmus' experience, but Lee can say also Luis, made much more than thousands of laws, thousands of national laws, because institutions had to adjust to the movement of the people. So it's clear that now we're in a moment that Europe must be open to global experience. And education is the proper place. Education is the only place to restart the possibility that our European experience, say that we spend more than 50 years to say European, not to say Italian or Finnish or French. We spend 50 years to say European experience. We don't have 50 years now. We have rapidly to move to programs able to allow people to go around the world having continuity and personalization of education, having the idea that we're able to speak together in a global context. This is the content of Fast One. Thank you. Sorry, now I have to leave because I have to conclude the panel on violence. I cannot be violent by assent. Thank you, I'm sorry. Grazie, sorry.
Merci.
Thank you very kindly. Thank you very much indeed, sir. We're going to pursue this global discussion. We're going to travel to West Africa. We're going to hear Mariatu Kone. Good afternoon, Madam Minister for Education and Literacy in the Ivory Coast. Madam, we would like to hear from you regarding the levers that you have identified that will allow you to improve partnerships, and please report on your experience of these partnerships in service of education. Thank you very kindly. Thank you, Madam. Thank you very much for inviting the Ivory Coast to this panel discussion. The COVID epidemic has led the Ivory Coast to completely rethink its education system. And we're going to reorganize it on a participatory and a cooperative basis and transform it profoundly to achieve quality education and equity in education. We undertook the Congress on Education and Literacy. This lasted 9 months, from July 2020 to April of 2021. And we discovered that the Côte d'Ivoire people greatly desired to see education revisited entirely and targeted at improving the condition of our people. And so we, since June, have undertaken a project to define, plan, and digitize transformative processes for education. And these projects will be aligned with the findings of that 1.5-year long consultation, national consultation. We will entirely revisit the curriculum, and we have a sectoral program that will also be completely revisited. And in the end, we will have a budget earmarked for the short, medium, and long-term transformation of our education system. The Ivory Coast has decided to increase the budget, education budget by 22.4%, given the complex equations that we have to resolve. The local group for educational partners is supported by partners who provide technical and financial input. France is one of our bilateral partners as part of the reconversion mechanism for the Côte d'Ivoire debt to France. The Minister of Education and Literacy has enjoyed the support of 289 million euro for the period 2013 to the present day. I can provide you with the breakdown of those figures if you wish. And as part of the World Partnership for Education, we have a new partnership ahead, which will make it possible to tap into several sources of funding for which we are eligible. As part of our partnership with the private sector, we have undertaken an initiative that is designed to provide public-private funding with matching funds provided by the state, and we will enjoy the support of the cocoa and coffee producers of the country, representing the private sector. So the education system in the Ivory Coast is being completely overhauled, and we require significant resources for this purpose. The Ivory Coast has decided to transform its educational system with a view to making sure that the realities on the ground are matched by appropriate programs to train teachers, to help learners learn, and to ensure that the partnerships are transformed for this purpose. Thank you very kindly.
La ministre, de nous avoir éclairé sur ces...
Thank you, Madam Minister. We will now travel to Mozambique, where a number of initiatives have already been undertaken to better coordinate the efforts of the European Union in that country. You, sir, Mr. Manuel Vazo, are Vice Minister for Education and Human Development in Mozambique, and there are several partnerships with Europe that are in effect in your country. One of them is in the area of the education of girls. What can you report on the success of that program today, please, sir?
Although the government of Mozambique allocates 22.5% of the total value of the general state budget to the education sector, this amount is not sufficient for the materialization of the objectives we have set in our education strategy. Therefore, we are grateful for the ongoing support of various partners, international agencies, non-governmental organizations, countries, civil society, and the private sector. I would like to say that one of the biggest problems in our country is that a considerable number of schools in rural areas do not have basic sanitary conditions. There is no water and no bathrooms. The result is that girls end up dropping out of school. In 2020, the problem worsened due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and this made it a priority for us to provide water and functional toilets in all schools in our country to ensure the return of students to school. The European Union was one of the partners that made available financial resources that allowed us to improve the condition of our schools in terms of water supply and construction of toilets in rural areas. This action has supported girls to remain in school until the completion of primary and secondary education. In the field of school health, we are working with our colleagues in health in the prevention of adolescent and youth diseases through activities related to comprehensive sex education. It should be noted that comprehensive sex education is one of the cross-cutting themes in teacher training, so that teachers can better support our students in making decisions about themselves and their bodies. Through the program I'm Able, children and youth are encouraged to continue their studies until the completion of high school by receiving school uniforms and bicycles when transitioning from primary to secondary school. Finally, since the beginning of the year, the vaccination process against cervical cancer, covering girls from 9 years of age, in addition to the prevention of anemia with the supplementation of ferrous salt with the folic acid in cyclic form. All interventions are important because they allow all students, girls in particular, to study in an appropriate and safe environment. These initiatives have supported the retention of our girls in our system. Our challenges. Some of our current challenges are the need to mobilize financial resources for the public to promote activities that better health conditions in schools, which includes the continuous improvement of sanitary conditions and water installation in all schools in the country, the installation of small school health offices, training of school health agents who can monitor the health of children and youth. There is also the need to mobilize financial resources for the national school feeding program in order to motivate students to stay in school and combat the levels of malnutrition, ultimately enhancing students' intellectual functioning. Thank you very much.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel Bazoum, Vice Minister for Education of Mozambique. Now we will go to part two. We'll see how we get on with the time, because we don't have that much left. So, how can these partnerships contribute concretely to overcoming the challenges that we face when it comes to transforming education? There are 5 different areas in particular we want to focus on, 5 priorities, and as we're speaking about conclusions, maybe you have a reaction or the policies put in place, for example, in Haiti, linked to financing, because of course this is a little bit a red line, let's say, or let's say the real crux of the matter. Well, thank you for this very interesting and critical question for the future of education systems. I think that the question of inclusion touches upon many factors. In a country such as Haiti, perhaps the first question is to see how we can integrate into this system all of the different profiles of learner and how we can really take account of this or be aware of this within the system. So first of all, we have to make sure that all children can participate in the school system and are included in the school system. The second response is when it comes to their actual school performance. How many of them participate in the school system and how many of them, and making sure that everybody has the same possibilities to succeed within the school system. So it's an economic issue, but it's also a teaching issue, and it's also a societal issue. in the countries, in partner countries or developing countries, or even in developed countries, it's extremely important to link inclusion to financing, because in many cases it's very clear that the economic question has an influence on the ability for families to pay for the schooling for their children. One of the essential questions today is to see how the state can help families have more domestic income, and how we can align education and domestic issues in order to overcome these obstacles. So now I move back to you, Mr. Diang. Thinking about a crisis situation, what's really at stake here? Thank you, and if you could make your response quite brief.
Thank you so much. As I highlighted earlier, and as we all know, education is a very, very powerful tool for young refugees and young people in crisis setting to use to build better futures, not just for themselves, but also for their communities. But just a week ago, the United Nations released a report that highlighted that over 222 million young people and children in crisis setting are in urgent need of education support. Myself, my family has been affected by war for generations. I was born and raised in Ethiopia, where my father settled after fleeing the First Sudanese Civil War more than 5 decades ago. And in 2010, my village in Ethiopia was attacked, so I fled to Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya at the age of 11 by myself, where I lived for the last 11 years. And I would not be here today if it was not because of education. You know, I was glad I was able to go to school in the camp and then later get a scholarship to go to Canada. I think, one of the most important things we have to ensure is that as we talk about education, as we talk about development, we should not leave behind young people who live in emergency and crisis setting, including young refugees, because we cannot envision a brighter future for our planet and for our world if we leave people behind. And those include young people living in crisis setting. Inclusion, which I think is one of the main theme of the Transform Education Summit, should not just mean allowing a small fraction of young refugees to access education. Today, they're just 5% of young refugees like myself in universities across the world. That is a very, very small fraction. These are leaders, these are engineers, these are scientists who will go and rebuild countries ravaged by war. As we all know, war is affecting almost every corner of our world today, and we should not leave behind those young people who have to flee their countries because of war, because they'll have to go back one day and rebuild those countries. So inclusion that, we have to ambition at the Transform Education Summit should mean leaving no one behind. It should not mean allowing just a small fraction of young refugees to have access to education. Thank you very much.
Merci.
Thank you very much. Now, before taking other questions, there's one regarding teachers, another regarding digital issues, but I'd like to speak about teachers' issue first of all. When it comes to an international level, how can we link this issue of teacher training to regional issues? And indeed, this was something that you looked at in 2019.
Yes, well, thank you. Actually, I would say that there is a link between the issues regarding finance and the issues regarding teachers and teacher training. We know that to reach SDG 4, we need 70 million new teachers to be recruited by 2030. Very big number. We know that there are teacher shortages in Europe also, but of course the biggest needs are in sub-Saharan Africa and also in Southern Asia. And this links to the issue of finance too. One of the key messages that I have wanted to present in EU education discussion has been the importance of investments in human capital. And when Finland had the EU presidency, we arranged the first ever joint council for the ministers of finance and the ministers of education, because it's usually ministers of education talking about education as an investment, but we wanted to get the Minister of Finance by the same table. And we also applaud the French presidency for strongly pushing this agenda forward. If you look at the issue globally, I think we need the same kind of paradigm shift, understanding education not as an expenditure in state budget, but really as a long-term investment in sustainable future, inclusive growth, and resilient societies. But of course, we also need to know where to direct the money. When we come back to the issue of teachers, which is one of the most important areas that we need to invest in, really, in teachers' competences, in teachers' working conditions, teachers' well-being, the attractiveness of the profession, supporting our teachers, and also recognizing their professionalism, so that we can support their autonomy, agency, and make sure that the teacher's profession also gains global recognition. This has been a great asset. If I look at the situation in Finland, this trust in teachers' professionalism, and also we saw it during the pandemic when highly educated and also motivated teachers were quite able to quickly adapt to the sudden changes that the pandemic brought with it. But of course, this is also a global issue and something that we need to work on together in our regional collaborations and cooperations.
Et justement, pour prolonger cette...
And yes, to continue with this reflection on teachers, Manuel Bazos, I turn to you in Mozambique. You launched a new teacher policy. So what kind of investments did you make?
Thank you. At the moment, we are finalizing the proposal of the National Teacher Policy. This proposal will be submitted to the government for its approval next July. The main objectives of the National Teacher Policy are A, the professionalization of the teacher career, B, improving teachers' working conditions, and C, the development of professional skills. We want teachers to be change agents capable of promoting positive growth for social and economic development. The Professional Policy proposal proposes A, the structure and the trajectory of the career of education professionals, necessary professional skills, a performance evaluation process based on a framework of benchmarks or professional standards and qualifications, and a system of continuing training with implication for continuous professional development. It also advocates the strengthening of trade union as well as the teachers' councils. The view of the National Teacher Policy is that these teachers' councils will lead the process of registration and certification of teachers in order to ensure professional ethics and deontology issues. In the preparation of the Teachers' National Policy proposal, we use internal and external financial resources from the support fund for the education sector. We will also mobilize financial resources for its implementation, specifically with regard to initial and continuous training action to strengthen teachers' professional skills. Thank you.
Merci. On parle de la question du numérique et puis des compétences pour la vie et le travail.
The digital issue now, and also sustainable development. Maria Tukone, how can stronger partnerships with Europe allow us to move forward in these areas? What examples can you give us from Côte d'Ivoire? Thank you. Well, when it comes to the digital world, we have an important partnership with Huawei. First and foremost, to make sure that all schools have computers and to allow parents to monitor the education of their children, also allowing pupils to learn in schools, of course, and also allowing teachers to be able to train themselves. And when it comes to teachers more specifically, and so they can train, we have a partnership with France within the CDD. It's a program focusing on the quality of education through teacher training. And we have been able to train many teachers, many school principals and heads of schools in general. And we've been able to train many teachers. When it comes to sustainable development, we have integrated into our curriculum the issue of education for managing the environment. And in some schools, in fact, we have created forests thanks to student activism. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Martina, Mamani, you said that, Damani, you said that it was you were under pressure at first because you had to go first, but now it's not the case. So it's not easy to close. But on the issue of digital, digital issues, you can close. Over to you.
Yes, thank you. So on digital issues, I think the first thing that we need to be discussing is how are we going to be bridging the digital divide between those who have access to digital tools and competencies and those from our most marginalized communities that don't. So we know that we're going to be needing many investments and capacities in this regard. But having said that, we cannot have education systems which are very well funded in digital tools and technologies, but have badly paid teachers, or they have close to none publicly funded support services for students. Otherwise, we would be defeating the purpose of trying to increase the quality of learning, teaching, and research, as we would be excluding the human backbone of our education systems who bring quality education to life. So I wanted to disclaim that first, before going on to which skills we can acquire, which I think is very context specific. For example, I can talk about my research, in which case I had done an Erasmus Plus mobility at a Leibniz Institute in Germany as part of my master's research, where I managed to really advance the experiments I was doing. And it led to me having a very high quality research paper that was published, and even more skills for me to analyze sustainable technologies to grow food. So in regards to research and innovation, yes, the use of digital tools and technologies are of course key to our advances in that sector. I also think education systems can make better use of digital tools for their administrative procedures. For example, in facilitating recognition of prior learning, making it easier for potential students to access universities or for students to go on mobility. So it's obvious that digital tools can be a good catalyst for gaining skills, but we cannot avoid talking about the risks associated with the use of digital and online tools. And I don't only mean issues of data privacy and cybersecurity, which already we do not talk enough about. The day-to-day use of digital tools by all of us, young or old, is demonstrating more and more gaps of our education, from teaching us how to practice critical thinking and to be able to debate opposing controversial views in a respectful manner in person. We need to address this by ensuring that our education enables a spirit of open, respectful debate, and that our education systems can provide digital literacy programs. Thank you.
Merci Martina pour ces...
Thank you very much, Martina, for the food for thought that you just gave us. Now we are going to have some speeches from the room. Mr. Jose Manuel is going to speak. We have intervention from Spain, who's going to speak to us about.
Gracias, ministras, autoridades, y muchísimas gracias por todas las intervenciones que hemos podido escuchar hoy por la tarde aquí. Han sido tremendamente ilustrativas y muy formativas para todos nosotros.
They've been. Thank you very much for your speeches this afternoon. I just wanted to make a very brief speech to reaffirm our commitment when it comes to education. These are critical moments. These are difficult times. And given the international context, we've just come out of a pandemic that completely paralyzed us, not only our economies, but also emotionally. And now
un terrible y cruel conflicto, absolutamente.
Going through a very cruel situation that we hope finishes as soon as possible.
Más silenciosas, pero no menos crueles.
And we're also seeing a war of inequality and poverty as well. And we need to continue to try and get out of this as soon as possible. So there is this, we heard that quote, education or disaster. And we need to try and avoid, of course, the disaster. So education gives us hope. It's future for future generations. As Mr. Deng said, it signals prosperity and the future for all of our peoples. In our country, in recent times, we have been really on a mission of self-analysis, and we have been putting in place many reforms, setting up new curriculums so that we can integrate all of these values that I've been speaking about into them when it comes to sustainability, to inclusion, to equality, to non-discrimination. And the real challenge of digitalization, as has been brought up recently, the challenge of digitalization needs to be approached with caution, but also with investment. And there was also a reference to the need for training and supporting teachers. This is absolutely key, because without the support of teachers, no reform can take place. Therefore, the objective is to really make sure that there is well-being in education, well-being of the teaching staff, well-being of the families, well-being of all stakeholders involved, and also international contribution and its commitment is very important. In our country, we have just seen a figure, an important figure. We have increased from 6 to 10% direct assistance or direct aid for development, specifically in the field of development. Therefore, we are in complete synchronization with the Declaration of Paris, and when we are ready for the summit coming up on the transformation of education. But we need to keep working together. Yes, we need to do more, we need to be more efficient, but we need to do it together. Not only together when it comes to financing, but also when it comes to the values that we want to instill through our education systems. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you very much. And yes, we heard that figure, 6 to 10% in terms of the increase. Christina Williams now. You are president of the Jamaica Union of Tertiary Students. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the speakers. So what I've been hearing is partnerships, and through partnerships we can have prosperity. But I would like to remind us of Team Europe pillars and why it's important that while we talk about harmonization and collaboration, that the pillar of understanding is employed. So, for example, during the pandemic, when we talked about digital learning and going online, countries like Sweden, Estonia, Norway, and Finland, which is here, were very good adapted in terms of online learning. But we also had European countries like Romania that fell behind. 90% of their young people in rural areas don't have access to online platforms. Similarly, countries like Jamaica, Haiti, that was here, and other countries within developing nations, in the Caribbean specifically, also have challenges when it comes on to online learning and accessing connectivity. So we're seeing that there is already a platform for collaboration, harmonization, partnerships to provide prosperity. But we have to ensure that we understand the specific context. You also mentioned the importance of training teachers. It's quite interesting because when we went online in Jamaica, we realized that many institutions didn't have online platforms to begin with. So you're talking about training teachers, yes, but you didn't even have the space that they would actually learn on because there was no actual websites or online platforms. So we have to ensure that when we talk about training of teachers, compensating teachers, that we also have the infrastructure in place. And I want to applaud the EU because they're actually launched a digital teacher training program in Jamaica, and I'm looking forward to that project being successful because we really need it. However, it's very important for us to harmonize the issues that we have because the issues, while it is that we may say Europe versus the Caribbean, there are quite a few similarities, and if we work together, there will be opportunities for prosperity through these partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you very kindly for those resounding words. We're now going to hear Ms. Danielle Gitman. Apologies, madam, we thought you were not with us. You are State Secretary for European Affairs, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Romania. And you have the floor now to discuss cooperation and development in the area of education. Madam?
Ministers, Your Excellencies, it's really a pleasure for me to be here and to promote a little bit the work that we are doing at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and at the Ministry of Education in order to respond as better as we can to the new challenges of transformation education today. I thank you very much for the interesting debate and the very nice ideas that have been promoted in this debate. I think that what we have to do is to be very forceful and very determined to implement what we are talking about financing and teaching of the teachers and so on. I think we all agree that education is the most basic infrastructure for human development and an accelerator for our sustainable development goals that we have put together. Education and youth has been horizontal priorities that Romania put forward at the front foot of the European Union agenda, and we have promoted very intensely this theme during our mandate as the Council presidency. This is why Romania, in its multi-strategic annual plan for education and international development cooperation, identifies education and youth as one of the 5 key priorities in the interest of Romania, alongside with economic sustainable development, good governance, strengthening the rule of law, as well as peace and security. We have put education as a flagship of our sector of ODA in Romania. More than 80% of the Romanian bilateral development assistance is granted in the field of education and through a very deep and interesting, I would say, diversified program of scholarships. Our platform, Study in Romania, which is a result of cooperation between the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I think it's a huge success since we have candidates for 145 non-European countries that has used the platform to apply only for this academic years to the Romanian scholarships. Therefore, we will continue to promote education and our projects on education through the ODA activities, and we will work towards ensuring access to inclusive and equitable quality education and training as a prerequisite in fostering our cooperation with partner countries. One and last thing that I would like to say is that we need also to promote the global conventions aimed at improving the rights of quality education, such as the UNESCO Global Convention on the Recognition of Qualification concerning Higher Education, which was adopted 2019. Romania, and together with other EU member states, have already ratified the convention, and diplomacy now can promote through diplomatic channels the ratification process and the importance of this convention when it comes about having this instrument operational. So we are ready to join the efforts for all European states in terms of education. We need to transform this education, and I think it is essential to be creative and responsible during this process, as this is about the future of our children and the future of our planet. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very kindly, Madam Minister. Thank you all very kindly. We are now going to hear a few words of conclusion. I'm going to thank the organizers for this extremely informative session where I believe much information was delivered. Thank you all very kindly for your resounding statements and your specific examples. I thank you very kindly on my own behalf, and we're now going to hear a few words of conclusion from Mr. Didier Lenoir, as well as Mr. Cyril Pierre, please.
Voilà, et désolé, on a dû être assez rapide.
Apologies, we are a bit rushed because we started a bit late. We have almost made up for lost time. It's quite a tight schedule. Mr. Ambassador, sir, hello again. You are the permanent representative of the European Union to UNESCO and the OECD.
Je vous dis d'y aller.
You have the floor, sir. Thank you very kindly. Very briefly, I would like to say that I entirely agree with you that this discussion has been of great interest. The contributions have been very enlightening, and I will take away one fact from this meeting. There is no time to lose, and as far as Team Europe is concerned, the determination is great, and we are absolutely determined to step up our efforts before, during, and after September's TES summit to better address the world challenges that we all face in the area of education. The Global Gateway Strategy will serve as a framework to guide our efforts. This is a framework which allows us to extend investments in the area of digital technology and transportation, research, and other areas, and we'll be working hand in hand with all the other players to achieve results on the ground. Our discussion, I believe, has been an opportunity to identify a number of approaches to achieve our goals, transform educational systems, set up partnerships, and reach the Sustainable Development Goal of number 4 by 2030. Thank you very kindly to all the participants.
Et merci à vous, Monsieur l'ambassadeur, et c'est avec le ministre.
Thank you very much indeed, sir. And we have the Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs of France to say the very last word of today's session. Mr. Cyril Pierre, you're the Deputy Director General for Globalization with the Ministry for Europe and Foreign Affairs of France. Thank you very kindly. I will be very brief to simply state that a great deal of ground has been covered this afternoon at a time when the media are full of concern for health, food safety, energy safety, biodiversity, threats to, and global warming. And I'm afraid that education is often overlooked because there is a silent series of crises underway, creeping crises, and this is a veritable accelerator for all of the objectives of sustainable development. Now, I won't summarize everything that's been said this afternoon, but what I will state is that a few key words have been spoken here this afternoon. There's a broad consensus that has been agreed on to say that education is more than a national concern. It's an international cooperation challenge. And let me add, and this was stated during the debate, that this is a positive-sum game in the sense that there are national education policies, and cooperating in education is also a positive-sum game for all. I'm tempted to say that it is a public good of international dimension. It is in all our interests that the world population have access to quality and inclusive education. And this has been stated repeatedly here this afternoon. What I also take away from this afternoon's discussion is the word demographics. This was described by the minister from Haiti. There are demographic trends at work that we must take into account. We need to train many teachers to teach the many new learners, and this is a huge challenge in many countries. Quality and fairness were also highlighted repeatedly this afternoon. The minister from Finland referred to those issues, and it was also stated that education in emergency situations and crisis situations had to be supported. Deng was very clear about this when he reported on his experiences in South Sudan as well as in Canada, and that was quite an impressive report. I also take away the word investment, and indeed not expenditures, as education is often seen as just a cost center. And we also discussed the fact that education was a human right. That was the Italian minister's statement. We all have a right to education. And two further ideas. The education of girls has not been given enough attention, including girls, and ensuring that they're treated on an equal footing is critical. And cross-cutting is not just one more element in our educational policies. It's got to be factored into those policies right from the start. And education in rural areas. Well, this was referred to by the minister from Mozambique. Clearly, this is of concern in many countries. So many key words have been spoken here this afternoon. And to conclude, I would like to say that as far as France is concerned, we will continue to be entirely mobilized through our international cooperation policy and our diplomatic initiatives in the area of education, both on a bilateral basis with the Agence Française de Développement, the Minister for Côte d'Ivoire, reported on the work that we had done in that country bilaterally, and there will also be multilateral efforts deployed through and with the help of UNESCO. We are much encouraged to see the attendance here this afternoon. Clearly, this is a discussion that is of critical importance, and it is also an area where we can and will act multilaterally, as I say, through the World Partnership for education, a global partnership for education. Education Cannot Wait is another example of a powerful partnership, or indeed the action of the francophonie through the Confémen. And we also act in Europe, at European level. So Didier Lenoir has recalled that the European Union, through the Commission and the Member States, and through Team Europe, is a powerful and deeply committed player, and has come up with solutions and models to serve its partners. And on the multilateral front, I believe this meeting has been extremely successful and is augurs very well for the September meeting in New York. And France will be in attendance on September 19th to work on furthering our aims. I do believe this was a very powerful meeting, and on behalf of the French presidency of the European Union, I'd like to thank you, not only for your attendance, but also for your active participation and your involvement. Thank you all very kindly indeed.